Okay, the recording has started. As usual, I'm recording on a ear-gapped device. So I'm not recording the screen, I'm not recording your names. That is exceptionally important for privacy reasons. We don't know where these recordings are going to be stored on university servers. So I would like to reiterate a couple of things that I want you to remember. So the lecture is going to be available after this recording is captured and I process the video and audio and post it back on YouTube and share the link via Scopus. Now, so slides for this lecture are already available on Scopus as a PDF, and the recording, I should be able to produce the recording in about 2-3 days. It takes a little bit of time to clean up the message and to augment the voice, so you don't really have to struggle listening to it. So there is, and it's even in terms of the voice, right? So the loudness. My dearest, my office hours are still available. If you follow the link, you should be able to schedule one meeting with me today at around 12:15, as well as in the evening, slightly after 5:30. I have one meeting with one student today. If you have any questions, you want to ask them privately regarding the assignment, please definitely do that. If you prefer to email me, I should be able to answer your questions before 8 p.m. or really early in the morning. I usually wake up at around 5 a.m., but that will be slightly late for the outline, for the deadline. So this week I posted one reading. There is one article about writing literature review in international business. By and large, how to write literature review will be very consistent across multiple domains and multiple research pockets, I would say, but it's a good starting point. Again, you probably have taken research modules before, so this is my course is more of a slightly structured approach to how to scope vast amounts of literature. So today we'll have a look at some of the examples. By the way, the qualitative data analysis software, the licenses are already available, and I have scheduled them to be emailed to you at around 11 a.m. However, you can download the software immediately and it will work. Maybe some of you have already downloaded it. It's MaxQDA. And it's basically qualitative data assessment. And if you are going to work in teams in the future, writing policies or writing a research project together, you will have to rely on some kind of software to be consistent with your findings. So you can install the software now, and it will work for the first 1 month, and then you will have to have the activation code. Activation code works for about the whole semester. I think that it expires sometime at the end of December. And since the software is not mandatory this semester, I feel if you have time on your hands, I would highly recommend to have a look at it, so you remember that it exists, and whenever you get to work with something similar, you get to maybe recommend alternatives if it works for you. Obviously, I'm not insisting on any of the particular software solutions, because that's it is about the budget and it is about personal preferences of the decision makers. Now, since the software is not mandatory this semester, I'm creating a self-paced content for lectures covering that software, and I would rather devote the rest of the freed up space to meet with you individually to discuss your work. I would like to remind you that when it comes to research, it is iteration, and it is the progress that your supervisor needs to see in your work. So meeting with your supervisor several times and initiating those meetings is exceptionally important. I am now going to progress to another slide. I probably won't be able to see your messages, although they are on a separate screen, but usually it's pretty bad for multitasking. And multitasking, as you know, only simultaneous interpreters can do multitasking, and they are paid a lot of money to do that. We are not simultaneous interpreters. So first part of the class today is going to be about literature review, and the second part will be about the assignment that is due tonight. Before we progress, initially, do you have any questions about outline? And maybe I can address them right now. If you have any questions, please shoot me a direct message. I will be able to see those messages. If I don't answer them, I will address them during the break if we need one. What I'm asking you to do is to look at the vast amount of literature that is available on Google Scholar or on Scopus. Use the methodology that I'm suggesting to scope, to kind of draw the boundaries of what you're looking at, because you cannot finish reading Google. It's impossible for a human mind to do that, but there is always a method to the madness. And if you have a structured approach to scoping the literature, you should be, first of all, you will stay sane, because the boundaries, technically you can reach the boundaries of reading the literature. There is a notion of data saturation in data collection as well as in reading the literature, that you read so much that to an extent you become so familiar with the literature when you open the article and you say, oh, I've seen this story before. But that takes a lot of time. Most of the time we don't have that time. And if you want to really, really quickly cut through the literature and grab the most recent and also most pivotal articles, that's what I'm suggesting in this course as the management exercise to get through the noise and to kind of grab the articles that are important. So what I'm trying to, with the outline, it's a gamble. Right now it is a gamble. You look at what you would like to research. I gave you a couple of slides in terms of what is considered to be a good topic, which has to be applicable, feasible. It should have learning, business outcomes and academic outcomes, and you formulate, and only then it has to be interesting. Very difficult to make a decision. I do understand that, but at the moment it is a gamble, and you support that gamble with the availability of the literature. That there has to be underpinning to your research question, because you cannot pose a research question without existing literature. At this point, it's not the case, because the point of the exercise is to write the literature review. I don't want to provide a sample outline. That's another question asked privately, because it is perfectly fine to be confused at this stage. You just need to make a decision. As a fourth-year student, you are making decisions and taking risks, because you are transitioning from university life to real life, and real life means that you are taking risks and making decisions, and the faster you will learn to do that, this is one of the managerial competencies that you can slowly develop. At this point, you're making a gamble, or taking a gamble, and deciding on a research topic that is aligned with your degree in digital enterprise management, that has literature underpinning, and I will show you how to find these data sets. I quickly showed you last lecture, and I'm going to show it to you today to reiterate the message. So today we cover synthesis of information, use of Scopus, MaxQDA, just one slide with MaxQDA. This is the qualitative data management software. We'll have a look at the Google Alerts, I will show you how to automate some of the research. I don't know to what extent you are busy and overwhelmed with information right now. Depends on various factors, whether you are involved with social media and generally curious person, and maybe you're taking 7 courses. I have no idea. So you look into ways of automating certain things to make your life easier. I will have a look at also how to critically analyze literature, what to avoid. There are several ways you can write, and I'm sure your writing skills are amazing. By and large, you took lots of courses during your career with University of Toronto, and usually Canadian students start writing from very, very early age and present their work, so that's not a problem. But the structure and what is considered to be acceptable level of performance, that will depend on various factors, and there are ways to cover your bases. At least when your supervisor is asking, why did you come up with that particular research question, or why did you take that path, you will have the answer. And that's what I'm suggesting in this course. And we will have a look at how to structure the literature review. And I will repeat that many times during the office hours, as many times as you want. Okay, so why do we need literature review? Literature review is a comprehensive and extensive literature review on different scholarly topics or areas. Generally, a literature review helps to identify research gaps and set future research agendas to provide clear directions for further research. Main purposes of doing the literature review are to clarify and focus your topic area and to critically evaluate secondary literature in order to ground your project in existing body of work. So you need to develop your expertise as someone who knows something about the topic and someone who knows terminology. It applies to every industry. It applies to academia as well. When you enter any industry, when you start focusing on one particular research area, it's all about trying to capture the lingo and the slang of that particular research area or the industry. And this is I'm explaining how to find a shortcut to do that faster, or at least to do it efficiently and not to get overwhelmed the way the literature review looks on the slide or the research process looks on the slide. So any research journey starts with an overview of what had been published, what had been done before, and that I do realize that this process can be quite overwhelming. So what do we mean by criticality? Criticality means not criticism. We have to keep in mind that there is a certain way your supervisor will expect you to show your criticism or critical evaluation. So let's have a look at some of the things to avoid or some things to strive to look forward to. So what do we mean by criticality? A good literature review will identify lines of inquiry and intellectual clusters. That's why I am encouraging you to use at least 30 sources, which is a manageable amount, and some of these sources will cluster together. You will see that there will be several authors that will write an article on a similar topic. Sometimes they will write something completely identical, and then in that case you can say, according to Brewster and according to Green, this trend is still a trend. And we also need to summarize previous investigations, and currency is exceptionally important. So usually people go up to 10 years to on a recent management topic, and also you need to have a look at the seminal papers. A good literature review also filters the publications available on a topic and highlights the most significant. To the best of my knowledge, your university search bar does not give you that overview of what is significant and what is not. If you're using Scopus, it's literally, or any other data repository that allows that export of a spreadsheet, that you will have a look at the citation index and you will be able to quickly see which articles are important and cited by the researchers in the field. Very easy to identify, and that's also scalable to other courses as well, so that if you know that your supervisor is working on a particular topic, you can easily find articles that your supervisor is very familiar with. Good literature review selects parts of the research to discuss. We are all humans. We cannot really focus on everything because your work will be too generic, but the language has to be general. We have to set the boundaries. We have to set the boundaries of our very limited scope of research, so we can make that contribution. A good literature review evaluates critically the literature, identifies contradictions, gaps, limitations, and inconsistencies. You are looking for either debates or consensuses. If there is a lot of consensus in the literature, that means there is nothing to research. That means that that particular topic was researched in detail and everything was confirmed. All theories were confirmed. And then you need to have a look at either other research question, other venue, or a claim that, well, maybe research is out of date and we need to update this particular theory in relation to a geographic area, in relation to methodology or demographic or location, things like that. But that has to stem from the fact that you actually notice that there is this inconsistency. And every literature review, good literature review, will suggest the next steps or steps in solving the problem. I would debate that last statement, because with literature review we cannot solve the problem. If we can solve the problem, that means that this is not a good research question. Somebody already answered that research question, and ideally you should technically get a research question or research gap that will help you to take that research further, identify methodology that fits that research, that fits the research interests of your supervisor and your skill set, and progress further with your research, proper research with primary data collection. Literature review should not demand or expect to great level of subject knowledge. So when it comes to we have to remember that anybody who is going to read your work is likely to be a general reader. Of course, your supervisor, of course, you will be a subject expert by the end of your research journey. But at the same time, when you are publishing your research, and that's actually quite publishable work, you can scale it later in your time when you have free time and publish it. The general reader, if you're going to be too specific, if you're going to use a lot of terminology, a general reader may not understand what you mean. So you basically have to assume, good literature review will assume that none of the documents presented are known to readers. And literature review should be comprehensible to the broadest range of your target readership. So the folks that are reading, imagine your reader, imagine your audience, and that will be general knowledge audience. So some common mistakes when literature review is conducted at the beginning of the research journey. Just a couple of points to make. A common mistake will be relying on secondary sources rather than on primary sources in literature review. How to quickly spot this? If you read lots of articles very qualitatively by browsing them, and you see that all of them are referring to same theory and same terminology or citing the same person, it will be in your best interest to find that primary source, because at the end of the day, you also have to validate, because there is so much stuff published right now. Sometimes people make mistakes and they may cite an individual, and then you go, I've done this exercise many times. I tried to search for primary source, and then secondary source takes me to another secondary source, takes me to another secondary source, and that secondary source is citing a book chapter, which is not citing anything. So if you see that kind of unscrupulous writing, you have to spot this. At the undergraduate level, that's not big of a mistake, big of a deal. But when you are doing something more serious, you have to ensure that your sources are there and your sources are primary sources. And again, if you are working with someone who's spending lots of time in that research cluster, they will know the people who have produced these seminal papers, and usually your supervisor can say, yeah, this is a seminal paper. Or you can quickly identify that seminal paper by citation index, and by qualitatively, it has to be quantitative and qualitative approach, that you also see that the same research pops up over and over again. So that essentially that pivotal paper that started the whole conversation for another 10 years, that will be these primary sources that you need to cite in your outline and in your literature review, identifying important people, very, very vocal people in them. Again, quite easy to comprehend that notion with social media and the scalability of influence of certain people. Common mistakes also include uncritically accepting another researcher's findings and interpretations as valid. rather than examining critically all aspects of the research design and analysis. So some folks go straight to the findings and ignore the methodology. But there are conceptual papers, there are qualitative papers, and there are quantitative papers, and all of them will have a different degree of validity. You also have to, before trusting the results, you need to always look at the methodology and see what you really want to do with your research. It's perfectly fine to read conceptual papers, but you need to be aware that conceptual papers are not are nested in literature and on future thinking of that researcher who is conceptualizing but doesn't have the access to data, motivation, or skill, or any other factors to take that research agenda and prove or deny these ideas. Or this is somebody who is very experienced in research, and they are writing a conceptual paper to set the agenda for the research community, for the rest of the people to pick up the slack essentially and start researching. That can happen as well, but you need to be aware of what articles you are reading. Then another common mistake, literature review does not report the search procedures that were used in the literature review. That's fairly easy to fix. You will see examples in different I'll give you two examples of literature review, bibliometric analysis of literature. Whatever you are searching right now, make a note of that. What keywords you are using, what limitations you are using, whether you are limiting your search to English articles, only English language articles, or you are searching if you're bilingual, you have that advantage of searching several research clusters where articles are written in native language, and sometimes you will find nuggets of knowledge that people are very, very qualified and experienced, but they don't speak the language, so they will write in their native language, right? So you can also definitely, if you know that there is a lot of research coming up in one language, you can definitely use Google Translator to kind of see. All these things can be automated these days, to see what the conversation is happening, what type of conversation is happening in different parts of the world, and whether there is a room for you to join this conversation. Another point that sometimes people omit is people tend to report isolated statistical results rather than synthesizing them. That's a big mistake, and it's also very tempting to cite statistical results. We cannot do that in literature review because we are reviewing the ideas, we are not reviewing the numbers. Statistical results borrowed from other sources, feel free to use them in reports, in business reports. That's what we do. But in a literature review, we are synthesizing the ideas that are leading to a primary data collection in the future. So instead of citing statistical results, you need to synthesize them and say what these statistical results mean. So we need to think of all of these things to avoid those general mistakes. And also another thing is, the literature review sometimes may not consider contrary findings and alternative interpretations in synthesizing the literature. This is where the confirmation bias can slip in. We do know that our experiences shape our reality, and we look at the information through the lens of our experiences, and we are more likely to pick the information that suits our agenda, applicable across multiple domains. We always have to fight confirmation bias when we are trying to be objective researchers. This is what journalists should do, and this is what researchers should do. This is part of their ethical code, to be distant, objective, non-agenda driven people. You may have an idea that this topic is important, but ignoring other alternative interpretations, that means that the researcher has a bias and the researcher has an agenda, and that's activism, that's not research. And one thing I forgot to mention, that when we are not reporting, point number 3, when literature review does not report a search procedure, that procedures that were used in literature review. That is important for replicability. In case you are writing a proper article, any researcher can come after you, look at your research and say, that sounds funny. I have read something else that seems to contradict what I have read. It can be anything. It can be confirmation bias. It can be search results that this person got. But at the same time, this person should be able to replicate your search procedure, punch in the same keywords, and roughly speaking, get the same output and draw the same type of articles from the database and replicate that research. And this is a growing problem, not in literature review, but in data collection and analysis. The replicability of research these days, all publications that are that think that their reputation is important, that they care about their reputation, they ask researchers to deposit the primary data into the anonymized primary data into research repositories, and there are several of them. So anybody who is questioning the results of the research may find that data set in a database and produce their own findings. That is rarely done. People cannot gain any points for their research if they are publishing articles that didn't find anything, and that's probably a very, very healthy thing to do. And also replicability, I haven't seen any researchers counteracting other researchers, except for one case in my domain, which is international business management. I found one paper that was published in 1980s, and then there was a follow-up by another researcher who basically took his data set and said, well, I cannot test the hypothesis, I'm really sorry. I found literally one paper like this where a second researcher went after the theories and debunked them publicly. Usually that doesn't happen. But the fact is that the person who did this is a well-known researcher in cultural research. He is the first person who did this, who conducted cultural studies in business, which is Gerd Hofstede. You may remember this guy from the organizational behavior class. This is the only person I found who was able, who had the data set, who had the guts, who had the motivation to essentially do that. Usually that doesn't happen. People publish, and then it goes into endless repository of published papers. People update their CVs and they move on. But as a researcher, you have to keep an eye on these things and to avoid problems in the future, because we are creating this digital track record of everything, and retrospectively everything can be double checked. So always think 10 years forward. So look for bias and protect yourself from them, from your self-serving bias. Another set of common mistakes will be summarizing each paper in a separate paragraph. For that, to counteract this mistake, I'm asking you to summarize 30 articles, 28, to ensure that you will be motivated to cluster the articles together. So you're not weaving one narrative, you are capturing the clusters of interests and ideas in the literature. I'm asking you either to focus, to save everybody's time and effort, either to focus on seminal papers or focus on recent papers. If you worked on a topic in the past, you may wish to focus on most recent papers. If you know that you're interested in something, like I'm interested in digital identity for the past couple of years, I always focus on the most recent stuff that was published. But I would start in the beginning. I would start with the seminal papers. I would find the influencers in the field, and then I would first read them, because they are usually the people, if they started the conversation, they had the opportunity to set the agenda and to set the terminology specific to this research cluster, and you need to capture that. To later on read later articles and see if these articles kind of match or sing along the people who set the agenda, or they're trying to deviate from the discussion. All of these differences, little dialogues, will be you noticing that is the way you show your criticality. Boom. What else? Other common mistakes will be no differentiation between the key articles or most important concepts, and kind of having the catalog approach. Again, very easy to find seminal papers and say, well, these are the papers that seem to stand out in terms of a significance because they have a higher citation index, and these theories keep on traveling from one research article to another. Overuse of long quotations. This is your work. You need to use your own words. You can use quotations only for terminology that you cannot change, and you have to preserve it for the purpose of research, that this is the terminology that you cannot change. And sometimes people do that with like adrenaline and epinephrine. That's the same term for same concept, but in different parts of the world, people insisted on different terminology, and that's why we know that one notion, one drug is being cited or used under different names. And the last point is poor referencing, usually not a problem, but I see sometimes misalignment of in-text citations and references. What I mean by that, folks being really, really busy, cite one person in the text, in the body of the work, and then cite somebody else. This happens when we are not chasing the primary sources, and we cite secondary source in the article, and then we cite the actual person who wrote the article in the reference list. That's usually, I usually check those. I usually start checking the paper from the reference list, how a reference list is aligned with the text. And I usually circle the reference that is not represented in the body. So try to avoid that. I don't see a lot of mistakes like that, but for some reason from year to year I get to see more misalignment of in-text citations and the bibliography list or reference list. Sometimes I don't have those problems, but usually I start with the reference list, and then I see what you have cited. I get the idea of what topic you are going to work on, and then I start reading the paper. Let's see, another mistake. I haven't seen this very often, but I would like to reiterate this. Sometimes folks, to boost the numbers of word count, people do this. Professor Donald McDuck from University of Cambridge argues in his article, then the title of the article, this and that. We can reduce this literally to McDuck 2019 argues the following. Now, we ideally should evaluate the credibility of ideas based on the rigor of the research, not on the credentials, at least in academia. And by and large, when you read enough articles, you will see who is the highly cited researcher in the field. You don't need to say this is a professor of some sort. Now, we reserve this boosting of credibility by mentioning these titles in reports and in news articles when we say that this famous person is saying this and this. But if there is a common understanding of who this individual is, we drop the titles. And in academia, again, we evaluate the credibility of ideas based on the research, based on the methodology chosen and how this methodology was actioned, not on the credentials. And again, we will know who this individual is anyway. If you spend enough time in the field, you will know. You will definitely know. So let's have a look at some of the examples of literature reviews. I am definitely not expecting you to replicate exactly these examples, but these are very good starting points. So the example number 1, Research Landscape of Business Intelligence and Big Data Analytics, a bibliometric study. What you're getting out of that is you're capturing the conversation up to date, and you're capturing the terminology. I'm assuming everybody can hear me, right? So Research Landscape of Business Intelligence, and then you see the highlights, or sometimes it can be called as an abstract. So the highlights are going to be bibliometric analysis of big data and business intelligence from 1990s and year 2016, and from you can extract that data from various databases and look at the spread of the articles. I'm not asking you to work at that scale because you will have to revise as many articles as possible, and sometimes it's a very lengthy process, and we are not doing that. And also the output in Scopus is limited to 2,000 articles at a time, so you will have to be very, very careful in how you are extracting this information if you really want to scope the entire discussion. Then point number 2, big data papers grow much faster than business intelligence papers, and that's for instance your way of signaling that this is how you are critically analyzing the literature, that you see that these different asymmetries pop up in the literature, that research community is more interested in big data papers rather than in business intelligence papers. It can later on you will try to attach explanation to that with primary data, but right now you're only stating the fact that you have noticed this asymmetry, that pattern in the literature. And then computer science and information systems are 2 core disciplines. You can see that the big data research is stemming from computer science and information systems area, and then sometimes you will see how these conversations pivot to other research clusters, like say to management or to social sciences and to medicine. But it started from computer science. So if you're going to do your real research, your master's research or your PhD, then you will have to trace back where the conversation had started. And this article also, this example, is also looking at most influential papers, and they are identifying those most influential papers. And the research framework is proposed. As you can see that the research framework is proposed is exactly what I'm trying to ask you to formulate in your outline, and later on in the literature review, that these are the business outcomes and academic outcomes, either or. You need to try to formulate why your research is going to be beneficial to the research community or to the academic community. The applicability, you need to articulate that applicability of your research, like why people should read your work and why you think this work is beneficial. Another example is a bibliometric analysis of international impact of business incubators. Another example. Feel free to find other examples, and maybe you can mention in your meetings with me which articles you used as a structure, as an inspiration to the structure of your research. And in this bibliometric analysis, researchers, several of them, are looking, again, they are observing trends in the literature on business incubators. And they looked at the around 400 studies, again quite a bit, on business incubators. And they took the data set from Web of Science database from the period of 1985 to 2015. And the study sorts these articles according to the following bibliographic indicators: eminent authors, which is seminal papers, those folks who stand out and who set the agenda; a year of publication; countries in which with the highest rate of productivity. That can be anything. It can be something is happening in this country. There is research, access to grants, and there is a general interest to research this area. Again, journals that attract these studies, a language, a type of research, and the research area. You can take this as an example for your literature review and replicate that for your area of interest. So this analysis provides insights into the nature and trends of research on business incubators. The result of the analysis reveal the lack of articles on business incubators and highlight the fragmented nature of the topic these articles cover. Boom, there is your research gap. And this is the, let's say another researcher wants to continue research. They can look at the limitations of the study and they say, well, I'll take it from there and I will try to push the conversation a little bit further. So these are quite straightforward and good examples of how you can structure your literature review in the future when you will be submitting your draft. I would like to remind you that the draft can be anything between 2 pages and to the full paper. It's up to you, depends depends on how much time you have and how you manage your research workflow and your study commitments. So preliminary research, I would like to remind you how to do that. We have demonstrated it briefly last time. I just want to reiterate how to generate the bibliography for your submission tonight. And again, I would suggest that you go to Scopus and try to replicate that in case you would like to follow my steps. So if we go to Scopus, it should say your name on top of the page that you are accessing it under University of Toronto umbrella. And if you are typing, I would suggest that you start with broad research keywords, and you need to use Boolean operators if you want to, let's say, grab the literature on expatriation and stakeholders. You should be able to type in expat with asterisks and stakeholder with asterisks. That means that the little star attached to both words mean that this is a wildcard, and the search will pick up all variations of the same word. So that means that the search results will return expat, expats, expatriates, expatriate, expatriation, and any other possible variations. Same with stakeholders. There will be stakeholder and stakeholders. So that's a very, very broad research. And then at this point, a broad scope of data set of articles. And then you decide whether you want articles, abstracts, keywords, things like that. So I usually keep everything. I usually keep articles, abstracts, and keywords. But maybe later you will be a lot more specific as to what you want to extract from the data set. Sometimes you just need to, when you're very familiar with the topic, you only care about the most recent stuff. So you will go in, get the article title, and later on reduce it to like a couple of last year conference papers. So this is another, and my research returned 74 documents. And right now for your work, you will be interested in, for the outline, you will be interested in a point over here, which is called all, and then these three dots at the end of the same line. So this is the way to extract the bibliography. Another example, which is, again, this was multicultural, intercultural communication, limited to English and business management. I think, yeah, it was business management, and I got about 535 results, which is a little bit better. And technically, you can give me the list of 500 sources. That's not a problem, because that part is really, really automated. What you need to do for the outline to generate the bibliography, bit over here, all is selected. That means that you will select all articles, and then you go all the way to the left. You see download, view citation overview, view cited by, save to list, and then three dots. If you click on three dots, all selected sources will be pre-selected for the bibliography. So, and then you just follow the steps. It will take time to generate. Depends on the internet and how powerful the computer is, and how busy the system is. You will be able to generate the bibliography in like 1 second, and that's Bob's your uncle. So you have a look at broad themes, and then you write your outline based on that. Then when you are grabbing your articles for further analysis, so when you click on all and then the next point, CSV export or anything, there will be something else. There will be a generic word called export. You will be brought to this window, and what we are interested in here is, I would say it's just Excel for now. If you're using any type of research software, like the reference management software, you may wish to also have exports in Mendeley and generic citing software, whichever you work with. I cannot really guide you on this, because software preferences become a lot more specific these days, and kind of learning, basically transferring to another preference, means a lot of learning. But what we really need here is citation index. Citation count is very important. This is how we will quickly learn which articles are important and which articles are not. And then we also have abstract and keywords that must be selected for your output, as well as I would actually select everything, because funding details and other information, it's easier to delete those, but funding information will be an indication of bias, that we need to see if the research was funded by which party. If it was a corporate research, that's another story. We need to keep in mind that sometimes research can be funded by corporations to advance their agenda, and we just need to be aware of that. I would suggest that your initial grab of Excel will be in just select everything, and it will be easier to import stuff into other. You can either stay with Excel or import it into MaxQDA. It's up to you. So there is that. Try to, if you're struggling with this, set an appointment and we will go through the steps. That's not a problem. Usually it's just if sometimes we are missing one step, nothing is working, which is pretty annoying. But usually you should be fine. If you go to search results, you go select all, and then for bibliography, these 3 dots, and then for an export, you click all, and then next to it, whatever tag there is, it's not going to be CSV export, it will be something else, because there will be an option, or there will be generic word export, and then it takes you to this slide, and then you get the Excel sheet, and you will work with that Excel sheet later on. So that RES format, the generic format, is important in case you will work with bibliometric with qualitative data analysis software, which is this one. And then when you can import a RES file as bibliographic data into MaxQDA, and then you can read and extract information in a more consistent fashion. This is again a scalable option. To what extent you would like to do that is up to you. I'm not going to encourage you or insist on it. I am encouraging you, but I cannot insist on it. But if you want to reduce the spreadsheet to a more manageable reading pain, you can definitely do that with MaxQDA, and I can show you how to do that quickly. Another way, if you are if you're using UFT library, I would recommend investigating multi-highlighter options add-on in either Chrome or Brave. Firefox has the same. I can't recommend any particular one because that will be personal preference, as well as to what extent you want another software in your like third-party application to collect your data. It's up to you, but like maybe temporarily you can create multiple highlighter, punch in your keywords that you want to investigate, and it will be easier to read. So that's what I mean by that. I usually read Twitter and usually read news like that. So when my highlighter is set up, I can easily see which sources have the keywords I am interested in, and that saves a lot of time. Another thing that you can set up for the duration of this course, and maybe for other courses as well, is Scopus and Google alerts for your topic of interest. And you can set up a folder in your email. Again, depends on the time you have on your hands to kind of set it up and whether it is necessary to do that. At an undergraduate level, usually students can handle that amount of information without automating the process. So, but you can also set up new article alerts for key topics in your field, and in your field, in business field and in academic field, and redirect them to a separate folder. So you don't have to really click on every time there is a new message arrived. You can set up them to be delivered every week or as they appear, and then you can check them when if anything new popped up in the research area of your interest, and then you can quickly read those articles and see if there's anything relevant. So that's basically automating the research for you, but you need to have a Google account. And one more source that I really would like to insist on and encourage students to read is Gartner, because this is industry literature, really important in case you are planning to work in the industry. Your line managers are likely to rely on Gartner research. So these are industry experts offering up-to-date insights, and usually startup companies like to use Gartner research as in their PR announcement that there is Gartner publishes various quadrants, whether these are market leaders or whether these are emerging leaders. And if Gartner places, if a startup makes it to Gartner quadrant, that means that gives them extra publicity, that they are reliable players in the startup world. I do encourage you to read those articles, especially if your topic is going to be business topic. The most recent trends in business are likely to be highlighted in Gartner, and Gartner is a source that University of Toronto started paying for in 2017, I think, and it is under paywall, so you won't be able to get access to it after you graduate, I believe. So try to use this source and familiarize yourself with business lingo. You can also set up alerts and to your U of T account, and everything will be delivered to you on a regular basis, and then you don't have to search for these articles. The search will be done for you, and then you basically save those searches and accumulate your database and start writing your research.